On November 12, 2025, just 8 weeks after the heavy oak doors of the family mausoleum closed on my husband Arthur, my daughter Sloane sat across from me in the sunroom, the very room I had designed with floor-to-ceiling glass so I could watch the seasons change over our 40 acres. She didn't look at me. She looked at her manicured nails, then at her husband Marcus, who was leaning against the doorframe like a debt collector. Sloane cleared her throat and said, "Mom, we've talked to a specialist. With the way you've been losing things lately, it's just not safe for you to be here alone. We've found a lovely suite at the Heritage. You need to be packed by the weekend." I looked at the $4,200 Persian rug beneath her feet, and then at the hidden camera lens tucked into the molding of the bookshelf behind her. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply said, "I understand," and watched the flicker of greedy relief cross Marcus's face. What they didn't know was that I had been recording every word of their concern for the past month. They thought they were disposing of a forgetful widow, but they were actually walking into a trap set by the woman who had quietly built the very empire they were trying to steal. You see, for 50 years I played the role of the supportive wife. Arthur was the face of Banks Construction, the man who shook hands at galas and wore the hard hat for the local news. But while Arthur was the face, I was the spine. I was 22 when I started managing the ledgers for his father's small masonry business. By the time I was 30, I had moved our assets into a series of tax-protected trusts that even the most aggressive IRS auditors couldn't penetrate. I allowed Arthur to believe he was the mastermind because I loved him, and because in our world, a woman who is too good with numbers is often viewed with suspicion. I wore the pearls, I hosted the dinners, and I maintained a strategic mask of domesticity. I let everyone, including my own daughter, believe that my only concern was the color of the hydrangeas in the garden. It was a perfect camouflage. It allowed me to see everything while being seen as nothing more than a background character in Arthur's success story. The campaign to get rid of me didn't start with a bang. It started with a whisper. Shortly after the funeral, Sloane began finding things I had supposedly misplaced. I would wake up to find my car keys in the refrigerator or my reading glasses in the flower pots. Marcus would come over and gently tell me that I had left the stove on for 3 hours, even though I hadn't cooked a meal all day. They brought in a family friend, Dr. Eris, who spoke to me in that slow, patronizing tone people use for toddlers. He suggested that my episodes of confusion were signs of early-onset dementia. They were gaslighting me with the clinical precision of a surgical team. But I had been an auditor for 5 decades. I knew how to track a discrepancy. I started keeping a log in a small notebook I kept taped to the underside of the floorboards in the pantry. Every time Marcus claimed I had forgotten something, I checked my own timestamp notes. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being hunted. The motive became clear on a Tuesday night while Sloane and Marcus were attending a charity gala for the local hospital, an event funded by a $50,000 donation from my late husband's estate. I knew Marcus always carried a black leather folder, and I knew he kept it in his home office, which was technically my home office. He thought a 4-digit digital code on the door was enough to keep me out. He forgot that I was the one who had installed the security system for the entire company 10 years ago. It took me less than 3 minutes to bypass the lock. Inside that folder, I didn't just find plans for my care facility. I found the autopsy of a dying business. Marcus had taken a $1.2 million loan from the family trust to fund a tech startup that had collapsed 6 months prior. He wasn't trying to protect me. He was trying to liquidate my farmhouse to cover his embezzlement before the annual audit triggered a fraud alert. They weren't just taking my home. They were trying to erase the evidence of their own theft. The eviction came with the cold efficiency of a corporate takeover. 2 days later, Sloane stood in my foyer with a set of power of attorney documents. "You signed these last month, Mom. Remember?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. I looked at the signature. It was a masterpiece of forgery, my own handwriting slightly shakier, as if written by a woman losing her grip. I didn't tell her I knew it was fake. I let them lead me to the car. They didn't take me to a lovely suite. They took me to the Heritage, a facility that smelled of industrial floor wax and neglected hope. My room was a 12 by 12 box with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. The furniture was particle board, and the lights flickered with a rhythmic hum that would have driven a weaker person mad. As Sloane walked away, handing me a $200 prepaid debit card for incidentals, she told me I'd be much happier here with people my own age. I sat on that thin, sterile mattress and realized that for the first time in 44 years, I was truly invisible. And that was their biggest mistake. Independence is a dangerous thing when it's possessed by someone with nothing left to lose. From my small room, I didn't call the police. I knew the police would see a confused old woman and a respected son-in-law with a signed document. Instead, I reached out to the old guard. I called Silas Thorne, Arthur's oldest business rival, and the only man who knew that I was the one who had outmaneuvered him in the 1998 land acquisition deal. I called a retired forensic accountant named Leo, a man whose gambling debts I had quietly paid off 20 years ago in exchange for his absolute loyalty. We didn't need a badge. We needed a shadow audit. While Marcus was busy listing my farmhouse for $2.8 million, Leo was deep in the digital veins of Marcus's holding company. By Sunday night, we had the proof. Marcus hadn't just embezzled from the trust. He had used the forged power of attorney to collateralize a second mortgage on the construction company's headquarters. He was a week away from a total collapse. The checkmate was scheduled for the following Thursday. Marcus and Sloane called a meeting at the construction company's boardroom to finalize the transition of assets. They wanted me there to sign the final deeds of sale for the farmhouse. I arrived looking exactly as they expected. Frail, wearing an old cardigan, and clutching a knitting bag like a life raft. Marcus was radiant, radiating the confidence of a man who thought he had successfully buried his problems. "It's just a few more signatures, Vivian," he said, sliding a thick stack of papers across the mahogany table. "Then you can go back to your hobbies and stop worrying about all this complicated business." Sloane patted my hand, her eyes already scanning the room as if deciding how to redecorate it once I was legally non-existent. I didn't reach for the pen. Instead, I reached into my knitting bag and pulled out a small, sleek tablet. I tapped the screen, and the room was suddenly filled with the sound of Sloane's voice from 4 weeks ago. "We just need to keep moving her keys until she starts crying, Marcus. Then the doctor will sign anything." The color drained from Sloane's face so fast it was as if she'd seen a ghost. But I wasn't done. I swiped the screen to show the forensic audit Leo had prepared, a line-by-line breakdown of the $1.2 million theft and the forged second mortgage. Marcus tried to stand, his mouth opening to shout, but I held up a finger. "Sit down, Marcus. You're 42 years old, and you've never actually worked a day in your life. You've only ever spent what I built." I explained the final detail they had overlooked. When Arthur died, I hadn't just relied on his will. I had activated a contingency trust I'd written into the company bylaws in 1992. It stated that if any beneficiary was found to be involved in the coercion, abuse, or financial exploitation of a primary trustee, their inheritance would be immediately and irrevocably voided. The farmhouse wasn't for sale. The company wasn't his to mortgage. And the $14 million they were counting on to save their reputations had already reverted back to my sole control the moment that recording was uploaded to the trust's legal server. The room was silent, save for the sound of Marcus's heavy, panicked breathing. Sloane started to sob, reaching for my hand again, but this time I pulled away. "You told me I'd be happier around people my own age, Sloane," I said quietly, gathering my things. "And you were right. I've already moved back into the farmhouse, and Silas and Leo are coming over for dinner tonight. As for you two, I've instructed the firm to begin the recovery of the embezzled funds. You have 48 hours to vacate your house, the one the trust pays for, before the locks are changed." I walked out of that boardroom, my back straight and my mind clear. They had called me senile to steal my estate, but they forgot one very important rule of the game. Never try to out-account the person who wrote the books. I wasn't just a grandmother. I was the architect of their lives, and I had just decided to move the walls.